Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another episode of Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you. My name is VashSky, your host of today's ceremonies here, and with me, well, he is the one you've all been waiting for, the one that has come back from the dead in order to go ahead and provide us with all of his Hollywood insight. It is the ghost of Lou Wasserman, Lou Wasserman's ghost. Hello there, sir.
Well, better to come back as this than a 1928 Porter. That's my mother, dear. She helps me through everything I do, and I'm so glad she's here. My mother, the car.
It is so funny you bring that up because I know somebody, they're probably in the chat right now, who talked about that, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't think that show existed. And then you go and you look and you go, yes, My Mother the Car was a real thing.
Yeah.
Starring Dick Van Dyke's brother, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right. That's right. He played the banjo rather well, too. He was kind of playing the banjo before Steve Martin made comedians playing the banjo cool, you know? But, yeah.
And then he became a household name, doing all kinds of... No, wait. That was really the only thing he ever did, which was quite fascinating. There you go.
It's hard to have a career in the shadow of a sibling, so...
Indeed. Indeed.
Or at least my brother tells me that. With anger. Anyway.
Yes, indeed. Well,
I know my mother told me that when she was growing up, they lived like right on the border between two different high school jurisdictions, and she intentionally was put in the other one so she wouldn't be overshined or competing or whatever with her sister, and that was a good idea. That's right. Jerry Van Dyke was on Coach. Absolutely right, stuttering guitarist.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, there you go. That is something right there. Well, speaking
Jerry
of
VD, I doubt he used that nickname. But anyway.
Indeed. Well,
anyway.
Here you go.
Anyway.
Elio. Speaking of some box office news, we now know what this is going to look like here. In a sad development for original animations, Pixar Elio comes below industry's already pessimistic projections at the U.S. box office after grossing just $21 million on the lowest three-day opening weekend in Pixar's history. Whoa! Not good.
But you understand, if it had been the biggest opening weekend in Pixar's history, it's still a loser. Because they spent $300 million on a cartoon. My God, what's wrong with them?
You know, I was even going over the original trailer released, I believe, in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And because I went and saw it on Thursday, and I was like, I wonder if those reports that they were accurate, that they reworked this movie a lot, but just how far did they actually go?
Pro has a very good video that was up this morning about them literally almost shooting two movies because they compared the early teasers and the characters had been changed. And in the original story, he had a mom and dad, and then they went with the aunt and uncle thing because, hey, it worked for, Lilo and Stitch. And
it's extensive just how much was changed here. So this $150 million budget number right there, there's just no way. It's just there's just no way.
Well,
this,
famously, Walt threw out about 2/3 of what they'd done on Alice in Wonderland and started over, but didn't cost so much in those days to do that. I mean, relatively speaking, it was still an expensive proposition, but nothing like what it is now. So
nothing like what it is now, and those were fully rendered frames from what they included in the teaser. Who knows how far they went, with that early version of the film, but we had to assume that they went pretty far. They had voice acting, they had all of the ingredients in place in order to produce this thing in 2024. We know it was famously delayed and came out in 2025. New director, new script, new story, obviously, new voice acting talent there. It's just they spent a lot of money on this thing, and it's going to be beat out, handedly so, by a live-action production of a DreamWorks picture in its second week of release. This is How to Train Your Dragon right here, $37 million this weekend. That's almost double
But
what
again,
Elio debuted with.
I understand we have to talk about the competition and the rest, but it's relatively irrelevant because of the cost of making this movie.
Exactly.
If there were no other, if it was in every screen in every city, everywhere in the world, with no other movies to compete with, it's still going to lose.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's just no question about it. This will never, ever, ever make its money back. I don't care. A lot of people say, well, with the merch and the flywheel and all this other ancillary revenue that comes with these films. And it's like,
they're not going to get enough to buy the kid an eye, let alone anything else. That always reminds me of that great line. Larry Gelbart wrote this great film called Movie, which is 2 movies and trailers in between. And one of them is a boxing spoof. And guy wants to go into boxing because his sister needs an eye operation. And he turns to his mom and he says, you know what they want for an eye? An arm and a leg. And those were the days.
Indeed, those were the days. Goodness gracious. Well, Alan Ng wrote up a fantastic piece over there at Film Threat reviewing this, and I definitely have my thoughts on it for sure. But he says something really interesting here for discussion here on Hello Backlot with Lou and you. We're always trying to, educate the audience on film techniques and so forth. He talks about how the rule of thirds and how it's so important when creating either cinema that you film or cinema that you end up animating. And he was noting in how like 80% of this film did not employ that technique. And what is that technique, you ask? The rule of thirds is kind of, you have a frame, right? Whether it's 16:9 or 21:9. I know there are different cinematic aspect ratios, but suffice to say, you have this frame that can be split up with these grid lines that you actually see right here. And the idea is to put your subject slightly off, so that 2/3 of the frame can be filled with something else, and that creates a more dynamic shot. It creates the experience for the viewer that something that you're looking at something a little bit more interesting than maybe is conveyed. You can see things in the background of shots. You can go ahead and set things up story wise. There's a lot of reasons in order to employ this technique, but in animation, it's very, very critical. Now, to illustrate this and to see whether or not Alan Ng's reporting was, justified, and I know I watched the film and I can, say that with full certainty that they did not employ the rule of thirds. I went ahead and took the trailer and added some grid lines onto it just to kind of illustrate for the audience how little they actually employed this technique. Now, the bad part about that for a film like Elio is that it creates a very almost static experience when watching it. It's not very dynamic. It's not very interesting. I know my mom, who I was watching this with, actually fell asleep while watching this, and I don't know if it was completely the rule of thirds, but it is definitely boring to watch.
Here's what else it does. If I cut from somebody in the center to somebody in the center, your mind doesn't register the cut, and you might start thinking the other person is still there. Yeah. When I'm in the rule of thirds or over the shoulder shots, as we call them, the change from one person to the other is very, 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 very visible in the cut. I mean, but these are only techniques that have been developed over 100 years of movie making, going all the way back to silent films, for God's sakes.
Yes.
And if there's no excuse not to do it in a live film, there could be, in the sense that, well, I just can't get the camera in the right place. But an animated film, you can put the camera wherever the hell you want. You're drawing you have no excuse.
Exactly. It's all generated right there, and you can do whatever you wanted with that camera, as Lou brilliantly pointed out.
They don't know any better. Whoever's directing this hasn't got that message. Why not?
Well, it's very interesting.
But I've experienced this just recently. I hate to go back to complaining again about that awful preview show about Epic Universe. But we have a saying in camera work called one-eyed jacks, which is, if you're shooting an over, you want to see both eyes of the person you're shooting. If you're just shooting in profile and only see one eye, like a one-eyed jack in a deck of cards, you don't connect. Well, all during that damn show, they were shooting at those angles, and I'm going, move the camera a foot to your right, stupid. but it never happened. I don't know why they didn't listen to me, but they did. Anyway, it just shows
crazy.
You're hiring people who, I don't know if they went to the ABC XYZ $1.98 film school or whatever, but they never learned the basics. And
they never learned
here they are in charge of a $300 million disaster. So,
yeah. In some of these frames, you can see that the rule of thirds is implemented at least somewhat, but most of this is just right in the center of the frame. That's a logo, obviously, but it's so distracting.
When in the old days when they were doing pan and scan to put movies into television format, you could kind of understand it. In fact, the most famous instance of it that I know is the great film The Third Man, starring Orson Welles. Was shot on purpose by the director, Carol Reed, at all of these kind of, remember Batman 66, the canted angles, the boom pow stuff. He did a lot of that on purpose to make those dark streets and sewers of Vienna look more threatening. But when they zoom in to pull out the center to make it fit original TV semi-square frame, it cuts all that stuff off, and it's weird looking,
Right.
And then I always cite the example of How the West Was Won, where there's this big stampede scene. It was a Cinerama movie. And therefore, there's a shot of Richard Widmark and George Peppard, I think it is, yelling at each other while all these cattle are rolling through them. And in the original movie, you saw both of their faces on either side of that big wide Cinerama screen. In the pan and scan TV version, you see their noses and their lips with cows in the middle because they had to cut out the center, and that's all you saw in the center. And so, and if all of this sounds like it's really arcane and scientific and interesting, but not important to storytelling, you're wrong, because it's all based on where your eye goes and where your eye moves with a cut and what follows. In fact, it would be very hard for me to kind of pull it out and show it to you, but the great ones, like Federico Fellini, there's a movie called 8½, that I think is one of the best movies ever made. And there's a scene where it's a tracking shot of some people in the foreground, and they're on the set of a big movie. And in the background, there's this kind of pylon, this kind of sci-fi prop about 10 feet tall, and two guys pushing it. And as we track with the people in the foreground that the scene is about, that those guys with the pylon are moving in the background at more or less the same speed with the camera, and it unifies everything. And it's a visual game to put the audience's attention where you want it to go. Remember, on a proscenium stage in the theater, there's a technique that actors do called taking stage. And it means stepping forward, stepping down stage, moving, doing something to call your attention, the audience's attention, to you as opposed to somebody else on the scene. In fact, when they talk about people, stealing a scene, that's what they would do, is they would come downstage towards the audience to draw the attention to themselves. But in movies, the camera angle does that, and the cut does that. So, and especially because, unlike an actor standing on a stage, a close-up is 150 feet across. So when you make a cut, it's jarring, to say the least. Now, audiences have become educated visually to movies since the original days. And therefore, there is less disorientation if you do all that stuff faster and quicker and save time and space by having it happen in ways that you never would have got away with in the silent days. But still, it matters. It matters. And all of that is before you throw in the fact that you spent $300 million on this thing.
$300 million. And here's the thing, Liz. So you talk about pan and scan. You talk about adapting something like a cinematic format to like a television screen, for example. You know what the modern version of that might be?
Answer.
It's your cell phone. So a lot of people are theorizing that maybe they went with this, let's say, cinematic technique of throwing out the rule of thirds.
Style of filmmaking, in other words.
Right. To adapt this to TikTok and everywhere else. It's like,
when I see people like on an airplane watching a movie on their little bitty cell phone or even on a tablet, and I'm going, God, why bother? It wasn't made for that. But I guess you could be right. They could be making it for that. So.
Oh,
Or it could be a director who has no experience of anything other than that, and therefore thinks that's just the way you tell a story, is you shoot a strip up the middle. And the rest of it just falls off into the Netherlands. So anyway.
I want to go ahead and include this little clip here in order to end this little segment here about maybe how we got here. And we talk about how Disney has profoundly changed, right? And how the old stalwarts, the old decision makers, are just simply no longer there, and how
like those guys. Well,
yeah, like three of those guys.
That's an interesting mix of those guys. Yes, right.
yes.
I'm still standing, worse than I ever was, says the guy next to Lasseter. Lasseter, this is a rare shot. Lasseter's not hugging him. But anyway,
that's true. Well, let's talk about Lasseter for a second, because Valiant Renegade included a clip of Lasseter in his latest video, and I thought it was so good that I want to go ahead and include it here because he included it there. I think we're going to be okay, but who knows? It's worth it anyway. Here we go.
Make a great film. I believe you have to do three things really well. Tell a compelling story that is unpredictable, keeps the audience on the edge of their seat. You populate that story with really appealing and memorable characters, and put that story and those characters in a believable world. Believable for the story you're telling, not realistic. We're not interested in reproducing reality. It's a believable world. So those three components are kind of the guiding structure of this exhibit.
This was the man.
There you go. So
there's a compelling person in a realistic but not real environment.
Indeed. I just thought that was really so profound, because how many times have we heard, Lou, about creatives getting up there and saying, "Oh, the world that we're creating has to represent the world outside my window," kind of thing. And it's like, no, we don't want a realistic world. We want a believable one. And I think about the qualities of Elio.
Matters.
Exactly.
Context matters.
I think about,
and then that's not a message between two prisoners on their cell phones.
yes. I think about I think about the modern storytelling from like Marvel, Star Wars, and how it just simply does not incorporate these foundational principles, as John Lasseter beautifully points out. I think about Elio and how it has none of these qualities. It doesn't have a believable world, doesn't have compelling characters, doesn't have a good story, and it's like, why has this happened? That's why, right there, and it's incredibly sad. Lou, your thoughts?
You're right. Next.
Next, indeed. Well, it wasn't all bad news for the box office. It looks like Lilo and Stitch. Well, it's got $1 billion locked in, but it has been experiencing a little bit of cannibalization from How to Train Your Dragon at the box office, now eyeing a $1 billion to $1.05 billion global run. I do find that interesting, because I think some people said, well, it might be 1.3, might be 1.5. I always thought that over 1 was a little bit high, but indeed it is going to crack that threshold, just I think not as much as people might have initially predicted, which I think is interesting.
I'm just going to say what I've been saying for the last week and a half, 2 weeks, but it's worth repeating if I do say so myself. When you are figuring on profit and you are figuring it's the production plus the cost of promoting it, you have to remember that with something like How to Train Your Dragon, the live edition, every dollar spent on promotion is a shared promotion dollar with the theme park now. It's not just promoting the movie. It's promoting the IP, which is there in everything from, popcorn buckets and souvenirs and rides to the family suites at the Helios Hotel. It's just reinforcing, and that's going to matter on how much they spend on these things. It certainly is going to matter on Jurassic. I don't know if you saw, but the city of Plano approved all the murals and things for the kid park in Plano, Frisco, whatever.
Yes.
They're going to, when they heard it's a kids park, So we're going to have Jurassic. And I thought, scary dinosaurs for little kids? No, it's going to be cute little ones to get them to work their way up to the big scary ones. And it's brilliant. Anyway,
Well,
all I'm saying is the theme park flywheel that Disney more or less invented, Universal is perfecting in a whole new way. And it makes a difference on whether these movies even get a green light, let alone get a $150 million ad pub budget.
Yeah, and from what we've heard, a sequel's already kind of
forming. Sure. Why not?
Why not, indeed? And it's so funny because when I went to see Elio, I was like, I wonder how many people will be interested in seeing this. It turns out my theater of about 226 seats was only about less than 10% full, with about 20 people in that theater at the time that I saw it. But as I was buying tickets for it, there was a group ahead of me and there was a group behind me. Both of them were going to see How to Train Your Dragon. So it's like, why not, as Lou would say. Also, too, looks like
it might just be they never saw the animated version. They didn't know much about the IP, but
Correct.
all the promotional hoopla about Epic Universe made them say, I wonder what this is all about. Let's go find out. So
exactly,
they both
complements
feed
the
each other in that classic way that Disney used to do and now has no clue how to do. And the other reason why Disney has failed at it, frankly,
please,
is they take too long.
Yeah.
How many years ago, good, bad, or indifferent as far as the ride, how many years ago was The Princess and the Frog? And how many years ago was Moana? And how long did it take them to, after all that time and all that attention, to put up a sewage water thing and a non-working rip off of a popular attraction? So if you're going to take 5, 6, 7 years from a known hit and a popular character, you're running the risk that people are going to not be as interested anymore and be on to the next thing.
Yeah. How evergreen or how lasting are your properties? It's a real big question. And I don't know, something like Princess and the Frog, I'm not sure it's as everlasting as
I'm just
Disney
saying a second movie would have been a more immediate choice within 3 years. And then you have even more justification for doing the ride.
Well, they were doing they're making a series over there in Canada. Oh wait, no, that was canceled. So they tried, they couldn't.
Well, and then of course the big spanner in the works for all of this, I say with compliments to our wrenches, is the issue of. I had a brilliant thought here a minute ago and it went away. Is the issue of making these things last, making these things something people care about. And when you decide, well, we had a COVID, so we'll cut back. Or when you promise for years we're going to put Pandora in Disneyland, and when it finally is getting sort of 4 or 5 years from now, it's going to be a little bitty piece of junk compared to what people expect. But once they've announced that IP, they're stuck with it. And so it
That's
just
true.
goes to show you. I was mentioning to somebody, I was reading a book, one of the old Spencer, if you remember the TV show that was made, and Hawk and Boston PI. And Hawk is talking about a girlfriend of his who was in Hollywood for many years. And he asked her, out of everything you saw and did there, what was the one standout factor that you remember the best? And her answer was the lying. The lying. They lie with impunity, and they lie. And then I've told the story when they announced the UK Universal Park. I was watching a guy covering it who'd been covering all the developments about it, and he was showing that big piece of concept art. And he said all of his friends looked at it and said, yeah, but it's just concept art. They don't ever do what they show in those things. And then he said, oh, yeah, well, look at this. And he showed the epic and the real thing, and the epic stuff and the reil thing. And he says, these guys have this strange idea that if they put it out there, they should probably have thought it out enough to say, this is what we're really going to do.
Exactly.
And people respect that level of integrity and honesty. And well, they should.
Correct. I mean,
So,
how often do we see Disney concept art change? I mean, even like Monsters Inc. Land, for example. Now we're on our second revision of that concept art, and there's some, substantial changes right there. And a lot of people are saying, looks like things got cheaper. It's like, why do you do this, Disney? Why do you set expectations so high for yourself and then come up so short? It's absolutely fascinating here. I want to go ahead and conclude here by two things. One, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning has officially beat Dead Reckoning's entire box office run right there. That is very, very cool. We'll have to see where this actually ends up, but it's got a little bit of legs, so that's nice.
And yet, no more sequels and no rides. So this one has to stand on its own, doesn't it?
It does. It does indeed. Speaking of standing on your own, well, we know that they're coming out with basically a third iteration of the Jurassic Park / Jurassic World franchise. Apparently, Cosmic Book News has the story. Scarlett Johansson's Jurassic World Rebirth predicted to bomb at the box office. I thought this was kind of an interesting headline right here. What say you, Lou?
I don't know why they're saying that. Is there something in the article that gives some kind of reason?
Matt McGloin, Tuesday, June 17, 2025.
I mean, she's popular. The product is popular. So I don't know.
The upcoming Jurassic World reboot movie starring Scarlett Johansson could potentially be a big box office bomb, as the first participants are in for the opening weekend, and they're the lowest of the franchise, which includes the first Jurassic Park movies. What are the estimates? The estimates right now for Jurassic World Rebirth are that it will open to around 115 to 135 million. The kicker, that's for the 5-day opening weekend, as the flick drops for the 4th of July holiday weekend. I don't know what deadline is smoking, but they compare Jurassic World Rebirth 5-day opening to Jurassic World Dominion's 3-day opening of over $145 million, and still slightly behind. Please.
I don't know what else is coming out that day, that weekend. Usually that's a big weekend in the movie biz because, hey, it's summer. And I don't know what percentage of the large format screens they're getting versus somebody else. And I think it's a little early to say flop.
I do think it's a little early, and I think there's a lot of walk-up business that occurs with these specific productions, like Big Dinosaurs, right? That I think these movies receive that maybe some others don't, right? The iconography really gets you to walk in the door here. Do you think if this film has a chance maybe of underperforming, let's put it out there. I know Tom from Midnight's Edge was saying that this might be a girl boss problem. Do you think this will affect that film in this way? Or what's your take on this, Lou?
If it was any other actress, it might. She's popular.
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of people out there, not to put too fine a point on it, would like to be bossed by her. No, I say that because Natasha Romanoff is kind of a girl boss, isn't she?
Sure. Yeah.
And,
That's true.
So I think it's who if it was Brie Larson, that'd be another story. But anyway,
I think Scarlett Johansson is a compelling draw for sure. And
she sells tickets. She just does.
She does. Absolutely, she does. I'm very, very curious to see where this will actually end up. We know that the Jurassic World franchise, every single one of those films actually produced over $1 billion at the U.S. box office. We will see where this is. I'm very fascinated about the story. So we'll be tracking it here. Well, I'll be back that with Lou and you, but also that Park Place 230 and anywhere you can find the network. I want to go ahead and switch to this story right now, Lou. It's the one that everybody has been waiting for. We have been tracking this story here. Kathleen Kennedy lobbies for Bob Iger to receive honorary Oscar while ABC negotiates new Oscars TV deal. And, well, now we know the outcome of that effort. We know that, Bob Iger failed. And I know you have some extended thoughts on this because you wrote an amazing piece over there at that Park Place.
I truly did, if I do say so myself. And everyone should go read it, and then I'll have nothing to say now because I said it all in the article. But and the 2 PSs that I added to it because I left a couple things out. But basically, look, this is all inside baseball at the Academy, and to me, the net of this, other than nobody likes Bob, and nobody likes KK, and nobody likes being pushed around by them or attempted to. because there's no way she did this without him knowing, without him approving, without him even assigning her to do it. The big question, what number are they going to come to for ABC to keep the Oscars? Because the ratings have gone down year after year after year, which means the ability to charge advertisers more money has gone down year after year after year. And since that money for the TV show of the Oscars is the major funding of everything the Academy does, they can't take less than they have, because that would be an admission that nobody gives a damn anymore. And so it's a real interesting number, and I'd be fascinated to see what it turns out to be.
Yeah, because there's been some rumors suggested that Disney might opt to drop the Oscars entirely, because now they have the Grammys or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, we have the Grammys, which are on this sort of trajectory, and we have the Oscars, which is on this sort of trajectory.
I don't think it matters who does it, whether it's them or the other networks. The question is how much.
Yeah. The question is how much, and that's a very interesting.
And if maybe, if we want to get really Machiavellian, and I do not believe this, but I'm just putting it out there. Maybe they said, hey, if you promote me and they turn me down, we'll have an excuse to say, well, then we don't want your damn show. And we'll save ourselves a bunch of money and that problem of how much to rate it at. So who knows? Who knows? These guys, they play in their own little world, and
of course. What ultimately do you think led the decision for the Academy to not provide Bob Iger an honorary Oscar? Do you think it was this kind of campaign?
What has he done for them lately?
Yeah.
And frankly, they might have been considering it. And when she started pushing, they said, oh, no, we don't do that. And you don't tell the world you're doing it. Remember, this is 55 people, the board of directors, board of governors, they call it. And these are the same people who in recent years added stunts to the Oscars, tried to reach out and get more quote unquote diversity in the membership. And they're trying everything they can to stay afloat. The last thing they need is this woman who's about to be gone to promote this guy who's about to be gone. That's not the kind of game they want to play. It just isn't.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think what's surprising most about this to me is that this information got leaked out in the first place. I mean, usually these campaigns for the Oscars, we don't really hear about them. I suppose,
somebody in the Academy leaked it out on purpose.
Yeah.
Knowing it wasn't going to work already. Just because they just announced the press release doesn't mean they hadn't made the decision days and weeks before.
Correct. So, and I think following that decision, following the news of Kathleen Kennedy campaigning for Bob Iger to receive an Oscar, we heard the final list of who was
within about included. 2 days, 3 days, something like that.
Right.
And that's why I say all of that is somebody playing a game behind the scenes.
What games are being played is the question.
And of course, the obvious point is an Oscar used to really mean something economically for the studio, for the movie, and for the actors and people as far as what they got for their next. You see all these things starring Academy Award winner and the little thing of the Oscar and the credit trademark or whatever. That used to matter. It doesn't seem too much anymore, because the whole concept of these award shows has been either downgraded because there's too many of them, or revealed to be a scam in the case of some of them, when people inside the business knew that, for example, the Golden Globes, as I've explained before, and I will again if you want me to, have been a scam from the beginning, always have been. Well, so
I think people might be wanting to hear about that.
Well, look, the Golden Globes are given by the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Who's that? Well, we think of press as being, ABC, NBC, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times. But the press internationally, in 80% of the cases, I would say, is the government-run, owned propaganda newspaper. And the Generalissimo or the Presidente or whoever it is picks his girlfriend that he wants to boff while he's in LA as their Hollywood correspondent. These are not journalists and they're not reviewers. They're hoes, gang. and they are very buyable, and they always have been. And the industry's always known you give them a bunch of stuff and they'll vote for your picture. And it's an open secret. And they tried to sell the audiences, because of course the people at home didn't know, on it being some prestigious award, but nobody in the business took it seriously, because it was, granted, you would rather have your picture out there with a little thing in the ad saying, hey, we won the Golden Globe, because it might sell a few tickets or boost the cost of the Netflix return or whatever. But everybody always knew it was a joke. It's always been a joke. And so that's my opinion and what I know. And
is there any truth that the Golden Globes might be a preview for the Oscars? Because
I don't think there's any connection, or at least there didn't used to be. And the proof of that is a lot of the other awards, I mean, the ones that are legit, and I would count those as the Directors Guild, the Directors Guild, the Directors Guild, the Directors Guild, and the Directors Guild. They don't necessarily predict who's going to win the Oscar for directing. And that's kind of strange, isn't it, when you consider that in the Oscars, only people in that profession vote. Best Picture, everybody votes, but otherwise actors vote for actors, directors vote for directors, cinematographers vote for cinematographers, etc. So
are you saying that people other than directors vote for directors?
No, that's what I'm trying to say.
But, all right.
But they might be people that are in the Academy ranks as directors, but are not very associated with the DGA. So who knows? And also people, look, we just talked about this rule of thirds and all these people that are amateur night that are being given big movies to do that really being run by an executive producer somewhere. They do what they're told. And when they tell everybody, hey, our movie is up, vote for it because we need the win for the studio's sake. That is, if you like working here. Or anywhere, you'll never eat lunch in this town again, used to be the joke. But the reason why I say that about the DGA is not just because of my belief in it and affiliation with it. To give you an example, when you get nominated for a Directors Guild Award for, let's say, Best Picture, it isn't just the director. The director, the assistant directors, the unit production manager, everybody on what we call the director's creative team gets a nomination award. You get a little statue. The other guys don't do that. Why? Because they don't acknowledge that it's anything other than the one person. I mean, how many people have won acting Oscars because they had a good director and otherwise never would have got that well?
Right.
So
that's a good point.
It's a collaborative medium. It always has been. It always will be. And it's
a collaborative medium with a bunch of egos.
Well, and why not? If you're being paid all this kind of money, you must be good at it, right?
Sure.
Maybe not, but it doesn't matter because, hey, I mean, I've seen people that, they started out going to get a Big Shots dry cleaning as their job and wound up as the boss because they knew the right people. And fine, I guess, but it doesn't change their ability. It just changes their attitude. They might have been scared to death the first time they took over. But after a while, when they're getting paid the big bucks and everybody's coming to them for decisions, well, hell, I must be this good. Everybody's giving me the credit and the money. So, look, there's so much money in this business for granted hard work and long hours for what, 3 months to make a feature? For what, a week and a half, 2 weeks to make an episode of a TV show? That most people would spend 6 months or a year at their job doing. And all the attention and all the yes, sir, and the yes, ma'am, and in other words, does it go to people's heads? Do they get inflated egos? Do they have opinions of themselves far in excess of their actual talent or worth? Sure, but can you blame them? I don't know.
There you
People are human beings, But
people are indeed human beings. Speaking of humans, Liam McNeil.
Except for that guy. That golden guy,
Except for that guy named Oscar. And not Oscar the Grouch. there's an interesting point here made by Liam McNeil. I want to go ahead and share with everybody. It can be argued that Iger and KK have done the most damage to Hollywood in the last few years, and the Academy knows that they'd be more sunk than they already are. Any truth to it?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
You think so. I think so. We think so. They don't think so.
Right.
Because if they said that, they'd be saying, well, the guy that put together the biggest movie company in the world and got all these various IPs together and amassed these massive wins before things went sour, maybe because of him, but they don't think that way. And also, if you do think that way and you verbalize it, it becomes, well, you're just sour grapes because you didn't do what he did. So there's a lot of ego going on here, gang. There's a lot of ego, and you got to understand it's that kind of biz. And if you think about it, look, you have to have a certain amount of that to succeed. If I've been reading a book by, I think, a brilliant British comedian named Jimmy Carr. And he wrote a book that's less about his career and more kind of a self-help. And he said, listen, I've written more jokes that didn't work than anybody you know. That's why I'm a success. In other words, you have to fail repeatedly to get to the good stuff. And think about actors. Think about how often they go on these cattle call auditions and have, they might be the best person, but if the other person watching them doesn't think so, they're not going to get it. And they get told no over and over and over and over and over again. Well, when somebody says yes, when you get that break and that leads to another one and that leads to another one, and you suddenly become the hottest guy in town and you're dancing with a glow stick. And the people are wondering, how come he's the hottest guy in town? Because it was his turn, I guess. If you think about it, the same thing happened to George Clooney. The only difference being he has talent, as what's happened to Pedro. And we were watching, what was it we were watching on the Genre Guys recently?
Batman Forever.
Well, but before that, it was somebody who basically got big. Oh, I know, because when we were talking about Batman Forever, we were talking about the next one, which was even worse. But Alicia Silverstone was a big deal at that movie. You put a good-looking, buxom girl in a rubber suit with fake nipples on it, and people are going to pay attention. Did she have great talent? I don't know. But it comes again with Sydney Sweeney. It comes again with, this week's hot property. And so you'd be a damn fool not to cash in when it happens. And you could go a little crazy, and people do. And it's a history of this business. So anyway, I don't know where I'm going with any of that, but
well, no, I think you bring up some very interesting points, and I think that the crux of it is that Tinseltown is its own town. It's very insulated from the rest of the world. It has its own opinions and so forth. And
I see Jan Monroe said something interesting. If somebody did a poll in this room and asked who's watched the Oscars in the last 5 years, I'm betting one person has watched it one time in the last 5 years. Lou doesn't count. Guess what? Lou doesn't watch it anymore either.
Still trying to figure out how to actually do polls, which is very interesting. But hey, if anybody has seen the Oscars once in the last 5 years at least, go ahead and put a 1 in the chat. I'd be very curious to know just how many people have watched any of the Oscars. I know I used to watch it religiously, but now
people with stronger bladders than I can last it out. But
yeah, exactly.
It goes on forever. So there you go.
Okay, well, Karen, no. Looks
and
like
by the way,
Mr.
Murdoch's hand should have been lower because it was picking his pocket in that picture.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's exactly what was happening right there. Now, looks like we have one person, at least in the chat right now, who has actually seen the Oscars at least one time in the last 5 years.
And they used to at least have those great production numbers for the songs, and they had funny people hosting.
Right.
And that doesn't happen much anymore either. back when Billy Crystal was doing it, and when, talented people.
It used to be a lot better. Speaking of talented people, I know somebody actually in the chat earlier was talking about how, hey, it's not just John Lasseter that had left Pixar, that we see all these immediate problems. It's the repercussions of having had someone like that leave, and I think that's exactly correct. John Lasseter not only left Pixar, but he took a lot of people with him, and a lot of people coming out of animation schools, well, maybe they wanted to get on the ground floor of another Pixar with John Lasseter. So there was this gravity shift, not just this cannibalization of talent, but this gravity shift of talent that occurred. And speaking of that, Bob Iger was the one to call it out. Here you go. Here's a little clip here from CNBC on the John Lasseter issue.
Did the loss of Lasseter, was it a blow to the company over time?
Look, there's a lot of talent at Pixar. There has been turnover as well, not just John, but there's been other turnover too. And that may have had some impact.
May have had some impact. There you go, folks.
Well, that's like being a little pregnant, Bob.
Just a little bit, right? It's very,
but see,
interesting.
These people who cannot admit they ever in their life screwed up are the people who somehow run things, and that's bad. The number one question that had, for example, there'd been an upheaval at the board when there had a chance. The one question an outsider would be asking at every juncture of that board is, what if we're wrong? Yes. What if it doesn't go the way you're saying? What if? And that's the question any good CEO asks every day of his life, every time he has to make a decision. And he's absolutely 99% convinced this is the way to do it. It doesn't matter if he doesn't have that 1% of, yeah, but what do I do if I'm wrong?
Yeah, it's exactly it. Bob Iger had the ability to fend this off at the pass. He had the ability to stand with John and say, you know what, this basically coup almost that's occurring within Pixar, that's not going to happen. John's going to stay. Obviously, he's had his issues. He's going to go ahead and get treatment for it, but he's going to come right back on, and we're going to have safeguards in place in order to, maintain his employment here. And it's like, no, we're not going to pursue that. We're just going to
the minute you allow the mob to take over,
correct,
you've lost forever, and that's what's happened.
Yes.
And as I've said, everybody always in the chats on the Pro Show and everywhere and on our shows, what if Apple bought it, or what if Bill Gates bought it, or what if Amazon bought it and kicked all these bad people out? The first thing all those bad people would do is sue their butts, because they would say, and be right in the classic words, I was just following orders. How could you fire me for doing exactly what you told me to do?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a question of nobody takes responsibility on the way up and nobody takes responsibility on the way down. But it's supposed to be the buck stops here with this guy. And he never saw a buck he could stop or I don't know. That doesn't work, but you get the idea where I was trying to make it work.
I get the idea. I mean, he has let the institutionalized
and then to come out and say, well, I watch every one of them 4 or 5 times, to make sure they're good. Mm-hmm. And then they stink. That kind of says maybe you should have watched it twice and said no. Or maybe you never should have gotten as far as watchable and said no.
Yes.
Bob, on the other hand, he's got a new building with his name on it. The fact that it destroyed a fire museum next door, well, Bob, I don't know how many people remember Tom Lehrer, who was a hilariously funny song guy back in the 60s. And he had a song about Werner von Braun. And it uses a word I guess I'm not supposed to use. But the line was, I just makes them go up. Who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner von Braun. So
gracious. Yeah, I think it's true. Anyway. It's true. Didn't that guy help with the construction of Disneyland and Tomorrowland? Yeah, look it up, folks. It's very interesting.
Documentary once, but because hey, let's get him. He's a name. He's a name. We need names. We need to show we're serious about science.
Operation paperclip. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that brings us to our last little story here. And Lou,
I'm so glad.
I'm dying to see what you actually have to say about all of this, because I think this is very fascinating. What you're looking at right here, folks, is an aerial shot of Universal Studios Hollywood. You can see this is kind of the area where the theme park itself kind of reaches the back lot. We know that people are able to get on board the studio tour in order to take you through the back lot. And
the glamour trams.
Yes, the glamour trams through Hollywood history. Indeed. And we also know that there is this Falls Lake right here, that represents the filming location for many naval battles and so forth, large-scale effects work, especially those involving the ocean. You just have this huge blue screen backdrop right there that can basically take the production anywhere it wants to go.
Right.
Right next door, you have the Fast and Furious Supercharged and all of that. Well, we've been hearing from quite some time that this area, or these two areas, I should say, are prime for expansion. And between the two, it's actually a very big.
Yes, it is.
It's pretty big in terms of the land that it offers. I'll go into that in just a moment. But it looks like we might have had our first indication that this whole expansion in this area is actually coming true. Here you go. This from Theme Park Wizard. He sent me this permit right here. And you can see the address. It's Universal Center Drive, obviously. But it says, the description, the proposed project consists of a new building located in the Z lot.
The Z lot.
What does that have anything to do with this?
Where's
Walk
the
you
Z
through
lot?
it, folks. The Z lot is right here. That's the Z lot.
Z.
Yes. And according to the contractors, I think, a website and promotional material, they're actually talking about how this project and what it would involve. What it involves is the tech services building. This video right here from Cal Missing, who does a great job archiving and old videos on Universal Studios Hollywood and all of that. But you can see right here, the tech services building is right here, all right, in between both of these properties.
Yep.
And the idea being that if you were to remove that one structure and locate it just down south in the Z lot, then this entire area actually opens up. And so this is kind of one of those chicken and the egg, or the like Avatar, for example, right? Avatar can't get started until they move the transportation center over there at Disneyland Resort to the other side of harbor, and then you can get going. This is a similar situation here. And apparently they just filed the permits to begin this work, and a lot of people are anticipating that this expansion pad area, which Cal Missing has highlighted right here, will be opened up entirely. This is about, 23 acres combined, at least from my area calculations. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, that's 14 acres. This is huge. Your thoughts on all of this, good sir?
Do we know what they're going to build? We don't.
We do not. We do not. Some people are anticipating expansions to Harry Potter, obviously. There are now 2 Wizarding Worlds that could make their home here in Hollywood. Also, too, Dark Universe. Apparently, Dark Universe was originally slated for Hollywood. And it wasn't until it was like, okay, well, we need 4 portals for Epic Universe. Let's go ahead and adapt these ideas here. But apparently,
why
the
does
connection...
it have to be something existing? Why can't they do something totally new?
That's a fair point. I mean, what would you want to see?
I don't know. All I'm saying is it's not, although it's a huge piece of dirt, it's not so adjacent to something else as to be an expansion of something else.
Mm-hmm.
Being without pardon me, not B-Tank. B-Tank is paramount, but being without Falls Lake is a little difficult. It gets used a lot, or has been. But maybe they're taking that into consideration and saying we can do without. I mean, I've told you about my crazy experiences at Falls Lake. With the helicopter blowing the sand away for the Lassie people, and that's the whole long story I won't go into again. But it's a big hunk, and I guess I'm laughing because we should be talking about this area because we just on the Genre Guys did the movie The Great Outdoors, and the house that was in that movie, that although it existed up there at Bass Lake where they shot it, the duplicate of it that they shot in most was down right there where it says Google pretty much for a long time. And they picked it up and moved it a few times. But
right.
It was a big, I think that movie got more attention on the tour than it ever got in the theaters because every time the tram had to go by there. And there's the house from The Great Outdoors. So
Right. I think the Great Outdoors. Let me just see here because I think the Great Outdoors house was moved again recently.
I think so too. Yeah, but I don't remember where. But
I can't remember. So I'm looking it up right now. It's somewhere on the.
I think that's kind of that green roof down there at the very bottom might be it.
Oh yes, it is. It in this shot it is. That's it right there.
But we don't know how old this is. So,
yeah, it's probably a couple years old.
Still had Buca di Beppo on the City Walk side, and that's been gone for a bit. So
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's around, but that's a great piece of Hollywood history as well. But I know they've been making a lot of changes over the backlot. The Supercharged, recently closed. What? Not even 2 months ago or something like that.
Right.
And so this whole area is really prime for redevelopment. It's interesting that they are thinking about getting Fair Falls Lake because a lot of big productions do take place there. But, Lou, I mean, so many of these productions are moving towards CGI only, or they're simply filming other places like, Georgia and the UK and so forth. Do you think that has anything to do with this?
To some degree, I'm sure. And it is unlikely that Paramount will take out B-Tank because it's right there in the middle of everything. And theoretically, you can go rent that and use it. What's funny to me is that's Kirk Douglas Drive. I remember when they named everything like that. And if you just back up a little bit and go up the hill to the south of this picture, that is the famous mistake in Spartacus, which is that they wanted a bunch of big beefy guys to be the gladiators. And so they had them marching down the hillside roads down here that you see at the bottom as the Appian Way. And actually, no, over to the left a little bit. Anyway, they got all the UCLA football players to be the gladiators. And they put them in the armor and they gave them a spray tan and all the rest of it. And they marched down. And if you look at the movie close, you'll see their Spidell Twistaflex watch bands. Because they didn't take their wristwatches off, so had a little bit of a time shift in Spartacus.
Yeah.
Anyway,
speaking of migrating productions as well, and man, this is why I love Lou because he's got all the great stories connecting to this property. But we also know that
spent many a year on that property, I'll tell you.
Oh yes. 23 acres in that other expansion pad, and we also know that we've been covering here on Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you and T3PO Live that this area right here, where you have this assemblage of sound stages, that is like the actual real heart of the production studio out here in Universal Studios Hollywood. We know that a lot of this infrastructure is being moved and migrated to other different places in the back lot, deeper in the back lot, away from the theme park areas, so that the theme park areas themselves can expand. So it's like you have a lot of moving pieces here. We've got the entrance project that's going to feature a 500 room hotel.
Well, you also have to remember that until relatively recently, they were building sound stages like crazy because there weren't enough.
Right.
Now, with production falling off in Hollywood, there was a story the other day, I forget which trade, about it isn't just the actors. It's the sound techs, and it's the camera people, and it's the special effects guys, and it's all the below-the-line people are moving to Atlanta or wherever because there isn't enough work here. So,
yeah, that's where the work is, and it's probably a cheaper cost of living to get out of LA, and so there's a lot of factors that go into a decision like that. And look,
the cost of living differential has always been true.
Sure.
The difference was that you could still make a living, and now not so much.
Exactly. And we know that soundstage occupancy has reached its lowest levels almost ever recorded at 63%, which is that's really low. So do you need this much infrastructure to support these productions in Hollywood itself? Probably not. And I think Universal is making that determination.
It's all a question of the TV business, really. It's not about features.
That's
and it's the TV
point.
business. We've talked before about what used to be a 32 or 34 episode season turning into a 22 or 23 episode. And now it's 8 or 10. And so do I need a bunch more, for example, of audience air-conditioned stages to do sitcoms? Well, not if I'm only doing 8. I'll do the 8 for one, and then it'll move out, and the next one will move in for 8, and the next one will move in for 8. And it's all the same building, as opposed to they're all up and running at the same time on the same schedule to meet the fall, premiere. Different needs, different needs.
Paul Newitt also has this that he's pointing out here, and Theme Park Wizard, I've heard this as well from him. There are also a lot of offsite independent sound stages all over the valley, and Warner available for production. What do you think about that?
I think I got to answer this phone. Hang on a second.
Oh, no problem at all. I think, Paul, I think you're exactly spot on the money. I mean, like I was saying before, Theme Park Wizard had brought that up to me as well. It's like, look, Universal Studios just might not necessarily need this much soundstage. Outside of just moving productions, you just have a lot of places in which can facilitate and support productions now. So the impetus that you have all these sound stages located on this specific property, the need for it is just maybe no longer there. So I think it's a kind of fascinating dynamic that we're seeing play out in Hollywood itself, especially with this specific portion of Hollywood as it's connected to a theme park, and how, frankly, the dynamic shifts in this way. It's just very, very fascinating.
Yeah, well, it just goes to show you when you invest in infrastructure, you got to have something you think is going to be useful for the long term. If you go up the river there on the left-hand side, you see those stages right one more notch, those right in there. Those right there, those 4, they're relatively new. They're a very, very new set of stages. And then the question becomes, since they're new, do you keep those and get rid of the old ones for the theme park? Right. But overall, do you need the number? So anyway.
That's it exactly. Well, this has been quite the episode here, Lou. I think this has been phenomenal. Really fantastic stuff. You were on the game as always. I know you have a couple of productions with the genre guys going with Batman Forever.
We get Batman Forever and The Great Outdoors, and after that, Nolan is going to join us for Special When Lit. If you want to get a jump on the genre guys and watch one of the strangest documentaries you've ever seen, you go look up a movie called Special When Lit, all about the history of pinball. I had no clue that pinball was actually legally banned for 30 years because they said it was a gambling game until they put the flippers in, and that made it a game of skill, not of chance. And it's a movie about all these people that are still obsessed with pinball. And if you think Star Wars or Star Trek or other kinds of nerds are nerdy, you haven't nerded until you've seen these pinball people. Oh, my God. Oh, good. And then we're going to do the Banderas and Zeta-Jones Zorro movie.
The Mask of Zorro.
Yes, and we're going to do a lot of fun movies. So come join us on the Genre Guys, both here and there. And Absolutely. Then, of course, I've been joining you every Tuesday at 3 for the T3PO show as much as I can, and usually on the Monday Night Pro show. And so I did Ron's show yesterday morning just because I was free, he was free, and there I was. So you never know when I'm going to pop up somewhere. Definitely. When you least expect it. And someone turns to you and says, "Smile, you're on Candid Camera with Lou and you." Anyway.
There you go. Big shout out to follow the Bradley's Fun right there. He does a phenomenal job, and thank you so much for redirecting your viewers, good Sir Ron, to us. Also, too, you can find me on T3PO Live, as Lou was saying before. Also, to that Park Place at 11 a.m. Eastern on Tuesdays and Thursdays. T3PO Live 3 p.m. on Tuesdays. That's directly following the pro show, and obviously this show every single Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Very, very cool. Thank you so much for watching us. Make sure, hey, you hit that like button if you haven't hit that like button yet on your way out. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed. We have amazing stuff. Well, beyond our live streams, we have the Lost Guys, the Genre Guys, and so much more. So definitely check us out right there. Definitely become a member at the Pro WDW Pro channel right there in order to catch the Genre Guys as soon as they are released with Lou Westman's Ghost. It is a lot of fun. Thank you all for watching. We will see you all next time here on Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you.
Thank you, everyone.